to some checks that I do for book manuscripts after they're already in layout. And the first one is I want to make sure that my book has a clean Preflight menu. So the Preflight shows up here in InDesign, and if you have a green light, you're good to go. And to open the Preflight menu, you just double click where it says no errors, and here it will show you any errors that are occurring in your document. The first error to look for is overset text, and this just means that there is text placed in the document that is going off the screen and is not fitting in one of the text boxes that you've placed. If there's overset text in your document, a link will appear in this space here, and you click the link, it will take you to the page in the document where the error occurs, and you can figure out how to fix it either by pulling down the text box or adding in an additional page where you can place that text. Other errors that occur in Preflight would be if you have a font that's in use in your document that is either not activated in Adobe or is not installed on your local machine. And it will tell you what those fonts that you don't have are. It will also have errors for links. So remember, links are images that appear in your InDesign file, and if InDesign can't locate what the link is, it will show a low resolution rendering of it, and it will not be able to process your link when you move on in the production process without knowing exactly where it is and having the file be named in the same way as when you placed the link in the document. And again, you can go to the links menu over here to take a look at links that are active in the document. I've only got one here for the logo for this book, but it'll show you where the links are, and you can also select them and opt to relink and then just navigate to where the link is located, or you can replace the link if you've changed the name of it. So I'm going to go ahead and click out of Preflight. The other thing that I look for when doing checks is to make sure that the fonts that are in my document are actually fonts that I want to be there, and this is also a way to check if everything has been styled properly. So for the particular book that I'm working on here, I have a number of fonts that are in the document, and I just want to account for what every font is doing. So I know for this document, Baskerville here is the body text font that I'm using for all the parts of the interior for reading. And then I know Hypatia Sans Pro is the title font that's being used. So that would be this font right here. So that one should be active in the document. And then some of these other fonts are part of the logo and also, like used for other things in the document. But then I have a few that I'm not sure what they're being used for, and those are the ones that I want to investigate. So I'm going to go ahead and look for this font. Okay, so I have like a version of this font over here that I was using for sketching. So I know that that is okay, and we'll get to this in a minute here. The other one I want to look at is the Avenir Condensed Regular, so I'm going to go ahead and search for that. Okay, so that's part of the logo as well, so I'm not going to worry about that one. And I'll look for this one, also part of the logo. So that's good to go. And then other fonts that I'm always going to look for when I'm doing this are fonts like Times New Roman Regular. This one is always worth checking into because this is the font that we use for cleaning our documents. So we're taking away whatever font the author used and replacing it with Times New Roman to get our text ready for layout. So if this shows up in my InDesign layout, it can indicate that there's some unstyled text in the document. It can also indicate that there's an empty text box somewhere. So I'm going to go ahead and search for this. So here you can see I just have an unstyled subhead end of paragraph sign. So I'm just going to go into the document by exiting out of the Find Replace Font menu, and I'm just going to make sure that this is styled with the proper paragraph style. So I can do that by clicking on the override here to make sure that that's styled properly. And you can see it did change the spacing a little bit, so very important to get that stuff figured out. So then I'm going to go back to my Find Replace Font menu, and that's the only instance of Times New Roman, so you can see now it disappears from here. Other things that I'll be looking for would be default fonts that are used in word processing software like Microsoft Word or Google Docs. So I'm looking for, Calibri, Cambria, the new defaults, Times New Roman, and then also the InDesign default, which is called Minion Pro. If that shows up here, it usually signals to me that there is a text box in the document that doesn't have any text in it. And so the risk is that text could get in there, so I want to go and make sure that I delete Minion Pro. So I've accounted for all these fonts now. They are part of the logo or the body text or title font. And again, I will deal with the Quillany font in a bit here. So now that I've looked at my fonts, I can exit out of here. Then I'm going to go back to the start of my document, and for the next part of my checks is I just want to run through the entire document and select everything that's on a particular page or spread. So to do this, I'm going to hit Command Option and 0 to make sure that spreads are fitting in the window exactly right. I'm also going to go up to my View dropdown, and under the Extras menu, I want to make sure that it says this so that my text threads will show as I'm working my way through the document. And then I'm going to use the selection tool, the black arrow, and on the keyboard I'm just going to do Command A to select all. And you can see that InDesign, when you do this, it draws a provisional text box around all the objects that are on the screen. And what I'm looking for here, I also have the type hidden characters showing up. So I'm looking for the text box to extend off into the pasteboard. So I might have things much like that text box that you saw that are from the design sketch phase that have made it over into the book layout. But I know that I'm not going to use them, so I can go ahead and get rid of those at this time. The other thing I'm looking for is the pound sign or hash mark. This occurs in every text box that's on your screen. Even if there's no text in it, you'll still have this pound sign or hash mark that indicates the text box has come to an end. So if I see these hanging out in weird places, it can indicate that there's extra text boxes here that are here unintentionally. And of course, they don't necessarily cause problems with the project, but the risk is always that you find a way to get text into that text box, don't catch it, and then have a fairly catastrophic error on your hands, which of course we want to avoid. Okay, so then I just want to work my way through the manuscript here, and again you can see the provisional text box is drawn around everything. So here's that part in the pasteboard. So if I find that the text box is drawn to things in the pasteboard, I can just go ahead and delete those at this time. And so now the text box looks like it should. And then I'm just going to go page by page. Once I start getting into the body of the book, I'm going to also start paying attention not only to the provisional text box that InDesign draws, but also to the text threads that are created between the different text frames in the document. So I want to look for text frames that look like this when I'm working through a document that has prose stories that are running from page to page. This indicates that it's properly going down to the next page, which I'm going to click to now. You can see the thread finishes here, and then this one on this angle goes up to this page. So I want to memorize those angles as the text goes from page to page. And then if I see an angle that is strange, so if I see an angle, say, going down this way, that could indicate to me that this is linking to another recto page or threading to another recto page later on in the story or in the document. And I would want to investigate what that is. Sometimes it can indicate maybe that you included empty text boxes after styling, which is a operations error for doing the typesetting. And again, I'd want to get rid of those extra text boxes. Now, the only time that I would be looking for an angle like that is if I'm doing like a facing page translation where the threads will look different. But if I'm doing a normal prose or poetry book that has items in the document that run for multiple pages, this is the way that the link should look, the thread, should look. So I'm going to pay attention to those text threads, and I will go through the whole book, though I'm not going to do that now. And I just want to go slow enough so that I can take my time and have my eyes look over all the different things that I'm watching for, which is those provisional text boxes. Other things that I will look for is sometimes you'll see like a thicker blue line at the edge of where your margins are and where the text box is. And this just means that the text box might be slightly misaligned. So I want to look for alignments I'm looking for the text box to go down past the bottom margin edge. So, and that would just be like a misplaced text box or something that's been moved accidentally during the layout process. And I'll just want to clean up those kinds of things at this point. And again, when you're doing this, you want to go, just as quickly as you need to, where you can still be sure that you're seeing everything that you need to see in the document. So I would go through, of course, the entire book here to make sure that everything is on the up and up. When it comes to text threads and placement of text, and then I also, anything else that I notice, like stray pound signs for extra text boxes, threads like leading from the end of a story here up to the next page here, I would investigate that because that can indicate that there's some empty text boxes hanging out in the document. So if I get through this and I find anything that I need to change, I can go ahead and make that change right away in the document. I don't have to ask for approval for any kinds of like typesetting or placement mistakes that I've made during the process, so I can go ahead and fix that stuff. Once I get through these checks, the preflights, the preflight check, the font check, and then also the page by page selection tool, select all check, then I'm ready to compare the book in layout with the original. And I can, if I have a printout of the original, that's my preferred way to go about it. I don't happen to have one for this book, so I'm just going to use the Microsoft Word version here. And so I'm going to go back to the preface, and you would want to check any page that is likely to have a lot of text on it that could be a mistake. So I usually will start with the table of contents, but I don't have that in the original, so I'm just going to do the text check. And what I want to do here is anything that reads like a line of poetry, I'm going to look at first word, last word. And then anything that reads like a paragraph, I'm also going to look at first word, last word. So I've got the epigraph here, and I just want to cross-check that. Okay, so that looks good. And then the first paragraph, the in word is we, the first word is we, the last word is today with an ellipsis after it. So we've got we today with the ellipsis. And then the next paragraph, I'll go back and forth to be more efficient. I've got you and then house at the end. So I've got you and house, so that looks good. I seat. And so on and so forth it would go. And what I'm really looking to find doing these checks is I want to make sure that the paragraphs are intact as they are in the original. I've seen from time to time authors will put a hard return into the middle of a paragraph to kind of like make the paragraph break how they want it to break in the manuscript phase. And when we get it over to InDesign, it will treat this like two paragraphs. So like if a hard return, say, was inserted right here, in InDesign, this to be able to would be indented. Sometimes it'll cause there to be a paragraph that starts with a lowercase word, and this check process will catch all of those things. I also want to make sure that any special formatting that I would set up as a character style hasn't been dropped. So you can see here that we have small caps in play, we have italics in play, and I want to make sure that the small caps and italics have been set up as character styles and preserved and not dropped during the typesetting and design process for the book interior. So when I'm going through here, and I'm not going to go through too much because it's pretty boring to watch somebody reading first and last words of paragraphs, but when I'm making this pass through, I can check for as many things as my eyes are able to catch on a particular pass. So if I need to do separate passes to do the first word, last word check, and then another pass to do the italic check to make sure that all that's gone, and another pass to do the small caps check, then so be it. That's what I will have to do. But if I can manage all that in one pass, I will also do that. And that's really up to your preference and what you feel like you need to do in order to make the check as beneficial as possible and to catch as much as possible. So when I'm doing these one-to-one checks, again, these are not going to be edits that I would need to pass along to the author at all. So I can go ahead and make any corrections that I might find during these passes, while I'm in here. So once I've gone through the entire book and completed my checks, I would be ready to create a first round of page proofs. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that process. So to create page proofs, I'm just going to simply export my InDesign document to a PDF. And to do that, I can go to the File dropdown and select Export, or I can use my keyboard shortcut. And so this book is past the proof stage, so it's already got 3 versions of the proof in here, so I'm working on actually proof 3. But once you complete your checks, you're usually at the proof 1 phase. So I'm just going to go ahead and export this again to proof 3 and replace. And then in my PDF settings for this, the high quality print, the default is perfect. And you can choose to have it view PDF after exporting or not. I'm going to skip that for now because I'm going to keep talking about stuff in InDesign. And then you just click export and it will export to PDF for you. The next thing I want to talk about is looking for and correcting textual anomalies like widows, orphans, and bad breaks. So widows are words or parts of words that are left to by themselves at the end of a paragraph. Orphans are lines that are left by themselves either at the bottom of a page or top of a page that don't run the full measure of your text margin. And then bad breaks are hyphenated words like compound modifiers that take on an extra hyphen in one of the words because of the way that your hyphenation settings have been created in InDesign. So again, I will usually make a pass through and look for widows and orphans during one pass, and then I'll go back and look for bad breaks just because of the way that my eye needs to go. So I will do a little bit of widow and orphan checking, and then also show you how I go about fixing those if I do encounter any. The first thing that I like to do when it comes time to work with widows and orphans is to go up to InDesign's preferences, go over to the composition menu, and I want to turn on custom kerning and tracking, and this will highlight in green any paragraphs that have custom kerning and tracking in play. And as you saw, this is at the proof 3 stage. So I've already done passes through here to look at widows and orphans and fix them. So I will kind of undo a little bit of that work and show you what I did and what the effect that it has. So it'll highlight paragraphs here, and this is something that you want to turn on judiciously because I know it drives some folks to madness to have all these highlighted paragraphs when they're trying to work on typesetting. But you can also toggle into your preview mode by clicking in the pasteboard and hitting W on the keyboard, or going into view, screen mode, preview, and like toggle back and forth. In the preview mode, the custom kerning and tracking highlighting goes away. So when I'm correcting widows and orphans, I'm going to adjust the tracking in the paragraph in order to fix them. And this one here has been adjusted, so I'm just going to click to look at the paragraph. So I've tracked this out by 15, and that'll correct some kind of problem that was occurring. Okay, so I've got an orphan line up here. You can see that. So the line doesn't go the full measure. When it comes to orphan lines, the ones that are at the top of a page are more important to fix than like this orphan down here at the bottom. If I had no ability to fix this, in theory, I could leave it. I see a lot of these left in contemporary books, but I will make every effort to fix it if I can. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into the paragraph, and I'm also going to undo the tracking here. Okay, so to fix this one, like I'm looking for either like surrounding paragraphs that have just a few characters or words overlapping, or paragraphs like this one that go almost all the way across. When you're fixing widows and orphans using the tracking option in InDesign, the longer the paragraph is, tracking adjusts the space between all the characters and words. So the longer a paragraph is, the more space there is, the more the paragraph will come over. Otherwise, if I'm looking at shorter paragraphs like this one has a possibility to come over, but it's probably not ideal. And also when I'm looking at paragraphs, don't forget to consider the paragraph where the problem is occurring. So I have this orphan here, And as you can see, I tracked it out to 15, which was what I needed to make that orphan line go over. So I'm going to go ahead and do that again. So you can see then the green highlighting comes on, and you can see that my orphaned line here now goes over to the next line, which is what I wanted to happen, so it fixed that problem. But in doing that, it created another one, and this is another important guideline for fixing widows and orphans. You must move story by story in your document, and like chapter by chapter, and you have to fix them in order. So the first one that occurs has to be fixed first, because it will affect the paragraphs that are happening later on. Okay, so I've got that one fixed. Now what I'd like to have happen is to track this paragraph in and bring this over. And again, like I said, longer paragraph here, there's a better chance to track that in. So I'm going to go ahead and track it in by 5. You can see it almost gets there. And when I track it in by 10, it does get there. So I don't want to go in or out by more than 15 when it comes to my tracking. When you get past plus or minus 15 in your tracking settings, it starts to become very noticeable that the tracking is different from the standard tracking of other paragraphs. Like InDesign will auto track a paragraph to make it fit exactly like it should, taking into account your hyphenation settings, your typography size, your leading, all that stuff. So once I get past 15, if I have to go to like 20 or 25, I'm not saying that I never do that, but then I need to make sure that the paragraph in question doesn't look extremely tight or illegible or different from the rest of the text. It should still look enough like the rest of the text where the untrained eye of a reader would not be able to detect that you've done this to the paragraph. So all that is to say, if I do go past that 15 plus or minus sort of guideline or threshold that I keep for myself, then I may think about tracking some of the surrounding paragraphs as well, provided they don't introduce additional widows or orphans into the mix. But that's something that I take on a case-by-case basis and use my eye to judge whether I need to do that or not. Okay, so I've got the first story here out of the way. Then I can look at subsequent stories. So this one looks like it is tracked in a little bit, probably to fix an orphan here. Let's see what's going on with this one. Okay, so that one is, this is having the orphan down here is the lesser of two evils with this. I probably, when I went through this the first time, attempted to track this in. And shorter paragraph, it's going to be difficult to track it in. So I can't get it at 15, and because it's a short paragraph, if I go if I go beyond this, it's just going to make it very squished looking and not accurate. So just go back to 0 on there, and then I chose, like I said, the lesser of two evils here. So rather have this than just the word names up there. And I'm sure that I played around with it a little bit to try to find something. Okay, now when it comes to widows, widows are just words that are left at the end of a paragraph like this. And some people would correct the word expense being left off by itself here. I don't typically do that. I'm looking for words that are, on account of the hyphenation rules, broken and part of the word is down here. Those are the widows that I will fix for sure. These I'm very likely to just leave, even though some people will fix them. And then of course, if you have something like this would be nearly impossible to get that to come up to the next line. You'd have to see if another word would come out and not space the paragraph out to a great extent. Okay, so here I've got an orphaned line to fix. And we did enter a bunch of edits in here, so even though I did go through widows and orphans before edits can change that. Which is why you have to go through this process of looking for widows and orphans after every proof where you enter edits, even if the edits that you enter are only minimal. So now I'm looking to fix this paragraph. It's a short one, so it's unlikely, like that other one, to go over on its own. So I don't have a lot of like great candidates for tracking in or out. Everything goes to like the middle of the page here, so see what we can do on this. I want to see what this looks like tracked out. And so even going out to 25, it's not going to get there. Okay, so now I need to make a judgment call. Like, this is obviously going to look like it's tracked out. And I've got this 3-line paragraph, so it just gives me so it fixes my problem by pulling that back there. So in doing this, I'm going with what I would call the lesser of two evils, getting that to be the orphan line instead of the single line at top of next page. And then, like I said, if it does affect the tracking, I may track out everything that's nearby so that it doesn't look quite as egregious. And this is not great, but it's not too bad. But I'm going to see if I can do something else. So that one doesn't work. The other thing when you're looking for candidates to like track things is you can kind of like let your eyes relax and get a sense for how it's being auto-tracked. Like what the zero tracking is, and you can get a sense of whether like this one has a little bit more looseness than this one does. So this one, even though it goes past the half mark, it might be a candidate for tracking in, but it isn't. This one looks as bad as that other short paragraph that we tracked way out. So that one doesn't work. It's this or nothing, I suppose. So because I did that, I would be likely to track everything out to 10 here. And then this really wide paragraph looks less like it's something that was a mistake. Okay, so those are the things that are kind of heartbreaking with fixing widows and orphans. Okay, so we've got another one up here, orphan line, and then orphan line up here. So if I can get this one to track in, this is a good candidate. It only has the 2 words there. It's fairly tight though. Okay, but it worked. So now that fixed both of those problems. I'm going to undo the tracking here because I think this is, okay, so this is a widow that I would fix. So you can see parasites is broken by a hyphen because of our hyphenation rules in the document. So I just track this out to get the full word to go over. And this is why I leave the 1 word widows alone, because lines like this, there's not a good way to fix that. Like tracking it in would make it very tight to get parasites to come up to that previous line. So this is the best way to get that taken care of. Then on to the next story here. And also I should say, like when I'm going through the proofs process, if I'm on multiple proofs, I'm usually not going to undo stuff that's already been done, mainly because I often don't remember it, and you can really get yourself in the weeds. I'm just looking for new issues, like new widows and orphans, and looking to fix those if I can. So this one looks like it was meant to fix that widow here. So I got that one, and I've got this orphan here. It looks like it's an unfixable orphan, though I can try with this paragraph here. Yep, and that did not take care of the problem, so I'm just going to leave it go. So I've got this uncorrected widow here. The word pretender breaks across the lines with the ellipsis there. So I just want to get a sense for what's over there if I track this in. I'm probably going to try to track this one out. Okay, so going out to 10 gets us there. We don't have to worry about making any other adjustments. Okay, and I will stop there and kind of go forward a little bit and talk about looking for bad breaks. So again, a bad break is just a word that is hyphenated, like a compound modifier that takes another hyphen because of the hyphenation rules in InDesign. So in order to look for these, I'm really just going to be scanning my right margins and looking for hyphens. So I have a hyphen right here, and making sure that there's not a double hyphenated word that comes with that hyphen. So same kind of a thing here. And now I would say that double hyphenations, aka bad breaks, are much more rare than widows and orphans. Any prose book that you're laying out is going to have widows and orphans in it. But you can have a book, even a novel length book, that got another widow here to fix. You can get through an entire book that doesn't have any bad breaks, but here's one. So over excitation, So to fix this bad break, I want either the hyphen to be right, the single hyphen in the word to be right at the margin's edge, or I want to pull this back. I have a better chance of getting it to go over with the X there, going to the next line of over X citation. So again, I'm just going to highlight this paragraph, and I want to track this out. So tracking it out by 5, you can see pushes both things, both words over X citation onto the next line, and that fixes that problem. So again, I'm going to show this to you. You can see the double hyphenation happening there. And I do want to say there is another way to fix these, so I'm going to show you that method as well. So let's say the tracking, which worked in this instance, is not doing what I want. The other thing that I can do is to put a manual line break in here. This is the less desirable option, because the manual line break will treat this paragraph, it'll always be there. So if for some reason I track this paragraph in or out later on in the phase of this book being in production, I have to remember where the manual line breaks are. So the manual line break, I can just make it on the keyboard by hitting the shift key and the return key. So you can see it goes over like that. And spacing wise, I actually like this better, but usually tracking is the way to go. And if I can't get it to work with tracking, then I'll use the manual line break. Here I like it because it keeps this paragraph still on the 3 lines, so it's not going to be tracked out. So this would also be fine, and I'll just go to preview mode to show you what that looks like. So then over X citation is there. And again, I'm not going to look through too much. I'm quite pleased that we found a bad break to work on here, because like I said, they're pretty rare. And watching someone hunt for them is not exactly an exciting thing to do. So again, I'm just using the mouse cursor, tracking down that right margin edge, looking for hyphens, and making sure that they're not compound modifiers that already have a hyphen. Here you can see another manual line break that I inserted, probably to fix a widow there. That also works for those. So usually I leave the hyphenation settings the way that they are in InDesign, except for hyphenating across columns, which defaults to being turned on, but I turn it off in all the paragraph styles that I create. Now some authors are very picky about hyphenation, and they may ask for some words that take hyphens to be removed, especially if they're on the shorter side. I think InDesign defaults to hyphenating a 2-syllable 5-character word at its lowest level. So I'll usually do that for authors. If authors don't like hyphenation at all, you can turn it off entirely, but that usually makes for some strange looking paragraphs. It also makes it incredibly difficult to do the widow orphan correcting that I demonstrated, just because the telling InDesign that it can't hyphenate, you need to have it needs to move the tracking more in order to move words around when it can't introduce hyphens in order to make the tracking do what you're asking. And of course I would also be checking notes and things like that for that kind of thing. Widows, orphans, bad breaks, but I'm not going to do that because it's kind of boring to watch someone do that. I do want to take a minute to talk about poetry. So there's some poetry here. It doesn't have any breaks or stanzas, but I believe these are song lyrics that are in here. So when I'm correcting poetry, I'm looking for single lines that are part of a stanza. So stanza is like a set of lines And I don't want single lines to be off by themselves. So some people who are very strict with typesetting poetry, like let's say you have a 4-line stanza, 1 line breaks, they would want all 4 to stay together. I'm the kind of person when I'm typesetting poetry, I'm fine to do like 2 and 2, especially when it's clear that the poem is working in 4-line stanzas. So some poets that you work with, they might have preferences about that, and if they wanted me to keep all the stanzas entirely together, of course I would make adjustments in the design and layout to be able to do that. But normally I'm fine, breaking up, as long as it's, 4 lines or longer. If it's broken into 2 different parts, that's usually okay for me, unless a poet requests otherwise. So the short of the poetry work is I don't want to leave single lines off by themselves. For poetry, I can get those lines to go over in a certain kind of way. Also, if you're using like hard returns between your stanzas in poetry, you can pull the text box up and down to move like a hard return over, like a non-printing character, so that the poem continues at the top of the next page. You can also sometimes like push the text box up to make like a line or a stanza go over to start on the next page. So in prose you can't do that, so I want to use the other techniques, like the kerning and tracking to make sure that that happens. Fix that widow, and you can see it undid this whole deal. So you can see I still have plenty of widows, orphans, and bad breaks work to do in here. Okay, so I think, nope. Alright, well, I'm going to end the video now and go back and work on fixing the widows and orphans here, but I hope this gives you a good basic overview of how we handle checks to the InDesign document once layout's completed, exporting our proof files to our proofs folder to be able to share with authors and other stakeholders on the project, and then also how we go about fixing widows, orphans, and bad breaks, and how we have to do that at every point after the proofs start. After we enter any edits, we have to go back and adjust those as we keep going. But thanks for your attention, and I'll see you in the next video.